So let's jump back to 1998 and see how one of those popular science fiction TV series of the entire decade made a very interesting leap to the big screen as we attempt to fight the future with the X-Files. Following the shutdown of the X-Files, FBI special agents Mulder and Scully are reassigned and help investigate a bomb threat in Dallas, Texas. However, Mulder's intuition has him searching a building across the street, which ultimately proves justified as Mulder discovers a complex explosive inside of a vending machine. The building is evacuated, but when Special Agent in charge Michaud is left to disarm it, he makes no effort to do so, causing the building to explode and collapse. In the wake of this, the FBI intends to lay the blame on Mulder and Scully, which may result in them being permanently broken up. While Scully contemplates a future outside the FBI in the medical field, Mulder encounters Dr. Alvin Kurzweil, who once worked with his father, and has pertinent knowledge about a massive cover-up with the Dallas incident. This soon pushes Mulder and Scully to examine a body found in the rubble, but died of something unexplainable. This stretches back thousands of years when primitive humans encountered an alien creature, which attacked and infected one of them with a black substance. This is further uncovered when the young boy crashed in the same cave a week ago and became infected, along with the rescue team sent after him. When government agents took over the site, they were paid a visit by the cigarette smoking man, who sees that the infamous black oil is used to gestate an alien organism within the human body. This startles the syndicate, who meet in London with our leader Strughold to address their alien conspirators' deception. When they attempt to administer their vaccine to it, the man in charge Braunschweig is attacked by the alien and left buried in the cave to die. When Mulder and Scully's investigation to vindicate themselves sends them back to Dallas, they come on the trail of tanker trucks from the cave site that lead them to a large facility housing thousands of bees. After barely escaping a pair of black helicopters, they both return to Washington, D.C., to try getting further to the point of this entire mystery. However, Scully is immediately reassigned away from Mulder, only to then get stung by a bee that was caught in her collar. After collapsing, she is then carted away by a fake ambulance crew, and Mulder is almost left for dead, which was orchestrated by the Syndicate to end Mulder's crusade to expose the truth. Now time runs short as the well-manicured man, after having dispatched with Dr. Kurzweil, gives Mulder the information, coordinates, and a weak vaccine to help save Scully and attempt to stave off the planned alien colonization. But what Mulder will discover is far beyond his imagination and will decide the ultimate future of the X-Files. So the TV series of the X-Files, which premiered in September of 1993, was created by Chris Carter after he was so inspired earlier in his life by shows like The Twilight Zone and Night Gallery and Kolchak the Night Stalker. It was such an interesting thing going into the 90s. There's such a groundswell of things about, like, alien abduction stories and alien conspiracies and all these supernatural, paranormal things. There was such a swell of that culture kind of building up so much. You had, like, the launch of the Sci-Fi Channel. They had this wonderful series called Sightings, where they report on all these interesting otherworldly type of things going on in the world. Such fascinating type of stuff. And even earlier in that same year the X-Files premiered, you got Fire in the Sky, which was the sort of somewhat based on the Travis Walton account of his own alien abduction back in 1975. All these interesting things kind of building up in the sci-fi culture, and all these interesting things that this series hit at the exact right time, with all the exact right people involved, with everyone in the writing department, everyone involved with the production, the entire thing, everyone involved in front of the screen, creating all these fantastic characters week after week, that this thing kept building its audience every single season. For the first 5 seasons, this thing kept building up higher and higher in the rankings and the higher ratings every time it kept coming on. So it's like one of those things, like, it built such a strong cult following. It was like one of the earliest shows to have an online fan base. Everyone going on those very early sort of bulletin board systems, those old message forms, stuff like that. Back in those days, it built up that type of following so strongly that it had all these rumors going around every season. Every time there was some new twist coming up, new development, all these various plots happening every single week. It just got everyone really excited. Got so much of a strong build towards that by the time you got to the fourth season of the series, about halfway through, during the Christmas break there, Chris Carter and producer Frank Spotnitz felt like they needed to get to the point where they had to tell a larger scope story. And they knew that had to go up on the theatrical screen. And so Chris Carter, while he's vacationing in Hawaii during the Christmas break, he starts banging out the script. And it turns out like the first 90 pages or so to Fox at a certain point is like, we don't quite greenlit, but we're giving you like a budget to kind of work on this thing. And so they started building the entire thing up while they're also in production on the fourth season. And so he kind of bangs out the entire script. He gets all the things developed. But such an interesting thing is that, okay, the film is going to take place after the end of season 5. So you have to plan in your head a little bit, where are we going to be in a season and a half from now? You haven't figured out all the little details or anything like that. You can just get kind of broad stroke type of ideas, but where we're probably going to pick up from, but there's going to be a lot of road to get to in terms of the meticulous nature of how each story is going to unfold, and all the ideas are going to come from all the different writers and all that type of stuff through the next season and a half. So that's a kind of an interesting type of thing, how they have to work in that type of way towards the story to be a little bit vague in some of the ideas, like a little bit more narrow down the focus of the entire film to just like the core characters and the core ideas and stuff like that. So a lot of the other things they kind of develop over the course of the next season and a half or so, they can't really get that into the fabric of the entire film because they're going to be shooting the thing before they've actually started production on season 5. So it's kind of an interesting type of thing in how they have to work in that type of way in a creative fashion to make sure that it kind of links up where they're going to be at the end of the next season when they haven't written the next season. And so there are some things as they go along through the entire film there's some things that don't entirely link up with where they kind of went forward in the 5th season to where the film picks up between season 5 and season 6. And one of the most interesting type of things with the X-Files series is that the production team always kind of felt like they're always like making a small movie every single week because the series had such high production values because they always wanted to make sure they had a specific look and style for the entire series. Very sort of dark noirish type of thing going on with the elaborate lighting schemes they had all the time and all the different things they did with the effects work on the entire series. And when they got around to actually doing the movie, they felt like, okay, doing an actual movie is a much bigger and much more demanding level of work involved with it that they're very much pleased to do, but I felt like, yeah, this is even bigger than what we do on the series. They could feel that there was a much larger production, and the guy they trusted with it as the director was Rob Bowman, who was one of the most trusted directors on the series, who directed tons of episodes at this point, had done solid work on Star Trek The Next Generation, and I'm directing that sort of Dragon movie with Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey, Reign of Fire. Kind of a fun movie that I kind of remember being kind of fun, but it didn't go over too well. But Rob Bowman ended up being executive producer and a director on the Nathan Fillion series Castle. So, at least on the television field, Rob Bowman is one of the most trusted guys, the most solid hands you could possibly have. It's such a great track record of fantastic work involved with that field. He transitioned so well because they took all that sort of high-end gloss feel to it, that shadowy kind of look to the entire series, and made it feel like a major motion picture here. That doesn't feel like, it doesn't make it feel like it's a TV movie or anything like that. They upped the game on every single level with this film, starting with his direction, because the director is the one who has like the main eye for the entire film, the one who's going to figure out the vision for it, the scope and the scale, all these different things, and Bowman does that. He nails it so perfectly well, bringing that aesthetic from the television series and amplifying it for that size of a screen that you get at the cinema. And so much of that is done to the fantastic work of cinematographer Ward Russell, who had worked with Tony Scott before. He had been like his main lighting technician on like Beverly Hills Cop 2 and Top Gun, and he ended up actually being the cinematographer on Days of Thunder and The Last Boy Scout. So, if you've been shooting films for Tony Scott, you're a fantastic cinematographer who knows how to make a film look absolutely incredible, and he does that with this film. Know how to use that wide cinemascope type of frame. Even though they shot on Super 35 and matted things off, they still know how to get that wide 2.35 to 1 frame looking fantastic. Know how to compose the shots for that wide format there instead of plopping things kind of in the middle, not knowing really where to handle it, that you have maybe on a guy who was used to working on TV. You got a guy who knows how to shoot a theatrical feature, and he brings that entire quality to the entire film. Everything just looks absolutely fantastic. How they use, again, a lot of the light and shadows type of stuff here and there is really kind of creepy in certain places. How they really create that aesthetic, but everything just has that sensibility, just like a bigger scope type of story on a big screen there. Everything looks absolutely wonderful, and how he photographs the entire film, everything comes together so very well. And beyond just the visuals, Rob Bowman enhances the scope and scale of the emotion of the story, because with all the stuff going on with Mulder and Scully here, where the X-Files have been shut down, and they're having all the blame put on for the mishaps down in Dallas, for the explosion and everything like that, and they're coming to the wit's end of being broken up and all this type of stuff, they amplify that sort of thing in the relationship between these two characters. It's so much at the core and the heart of what this entire series, this entire franchise is about. So much about these two characters, their bond, and the way they grow and develop, and they care for each other and grow their emotions between one another. It's very interesting how that goes forward in the story, and Bowman makes sure that those emotions get addressed and they're amplified to a certain degree, not beyond reason, but they're just made much more impactful, much more powerful for this large-scale story here, and wraps it up in such a great way with all these great horror elements. Right at the beginning of the film, where you got the stuff in 35,000 BC, in the Ice Age, all that type of stuff. Again, the cavemen down there being attacked by the alien organisms, stuff like that. And later on, when Jeffrey DeMunn's character of Braunschweig, he's down there also in the cave, and he's getting attacked. Every time that alien comes up in the entire film, they make it a horror movie. Absolutely, Rob Bowman just nails it so well with such a creepy atmosphere and sensibility, how they photograph it, all these different things. They treat it with the right amount of respect to make sure it is a terrifying sequence. They do such a great thing with tying that all in with the action and the drama of the entire story, wrapped up with a very smart sci-fi mystery. All this stuff comes together so fluidly. All the elements come together so fluidly, and it's kind of like a little sampler of everything that the series kind of had going for itself. You had the Monster of the Week stuff, you got the alien conspiracy stuff, you've got action, you got drama, you got some horror stuff here and there. So they hit off all the main beats of what the series really was known for, and nailed those things very, very organically throughout the course of the story. And Bowman just does a great job directing it all, absolutely positively. And of course, working so very naturally with the series stars of David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson. You got William B. Davis as Smoking Man. You got Mitch Pileggi as assistant director Walter Skinner. All these people who are regulars on the series perfectly transition in this film. Don't miss a beat. They're absolutely right on the exact same levels they were on the series, completely in step with everything like that. Nothing's missed a beat. No one's altered to a certain degree to make them not fit with what they were in the series. You know, even though there are some complications going in from season 5 into the movie, where again season 5 was written and developed after they filmed the entire movie, and things got a little jumbled there, but I'll get to that much later down the road here. But David Duchovny's always been a very interesting actor. He's always been able to take certain kind of quirky elements or certain dry elements of a character, make them very engaging and very entertaining and very interesting in such a way. And Fox Mulder is definitely that type of character, where they always had this whole thing where he's got all these little quirks along with all the stuff about wanting to believe in the supernatural and the paranormal and the alien conspiracy stuff, all these otherworldly type of qualities about him. And so David Duchovny always brought that kind of really nice dry wit and humor to the character. It always made him a little quirky in a certain way, but makes him very relatable, very charming type of character. And so much that comes out in his character in the film, where they got this kind of smart scene to kind of indict the sort of uninitiated viewers in the theater and stuff like that, where after he's gotten kind of chewed out by the Office of Professional Review at the FBI, he's gone out and got drunk, and he's kind of laying out his kind of story to the bartender and stuff like that about Spooky Mulder chasing aliens with a gun and a badge and all these little things about his sister getting abducted. So I thought that was a really kind of nice little scene that feels kind of organic, that he's kind of letting out his sort of troubles and his fretting and worries and stuff like that while he's getting drunk and everything. So it was a nice, smart scene, and Duchovny really gets that type of quality with the character so well, and they bring that out, especially in his character in this film. But you see some of the different elements that he can bring to the character here, where the driven dedication towards everything that lies beneath the surface. He's always a character that has a little bit further perception that certain things don't feel right, certain things don't look right. He always wants to look at things a little bit of a different focus, a little bit of a different lens, where they have at the beginning of the film where him and Scully are involved with this entire bomb threat that's been called in, and he has this sort of weird thing about going to check this other building across the street for some other odd reason. Just something doesn't quite connect with him entirely, and so everything kind of folds into itself from that point onwards, showing his character how he follows an intuition, a sort of gut instinct in a certain way, how certain things just don't look or feel quite the way they should, and that kind of brings him down into these investigations, into the unexplained and the sort of weird type of stuff going on. It's a great type of thing, how they have that in the whole film. And how his own belief and sort of his own dedication towards finding the truth of everything is kind of tested here to a certain degree, because he has to find something to exonerate himself and Scully in this entire situation, or else they're kind of done. Like I said before, she's going to put in a resignation. Mulder's going to be carted off to some random department somewhere. The X-Files are never going to get reopened. So it's like he has to go through this entire journey because him and Scully mean so much. That connection. He can't do this alone, as he says in the film. He can't go along the journey without someone like her right next to him to validate his work, to save him, kind of pull him back and kind of focus him forward. So it's such an interesting type of thing that the entire journey Mulder goes on the entire film, getting up all the way to the end of the film here, where he gets on the alien ship and he sees all these other things. It vindicates his pursuit. It reinforces what he is, what he's been pursuing all these years. It's a great type of story for him to see how that moves along and further solidifies what he's been after and his pursuit of the truth of everything that's been going on for years now. And so everything comes together so very well, how they put all the elements together to make a very solid story that is a little bit more understated than Scully's is in the whole film, but is still at the very core of the entire story here, dealing with guys like Kurzweil and finding all of these pieces of further information they never really had connected before. It's a great little stepping stone forward for the character to get all these things a little more solidified, to give him a little bit more of a focus moving forward throughout the rest of this franchise. And Gillian Anderson, people will talk days about her, because she's done all this great stuff, Hannibal and The Crown, and all these big type of things. She's been a very celebrated actress up to this point that we're talking about her right now. And it's such an interesting thing with the character of Dana Scully that, I mean, to see so much today, like, people talk about, like, strong female leads and heroic female characters, stuff like that. When you go back and watch her as this character in this series, in this film, she's right there. She's intelligent, she's assertive, she's strong-willed, but she's also vulnerable, she's also emotional, but it's all very much an intelligent character put together in such a wonderfully talented package that Gillian Anderson brings to this character. I like so much the beats of humor that they give to the two characters here. Right at the beginning of the film, where they're doing the entire search of the other building in Dallas, they got the great chemistry, the rapport back and forth. They give a little bit of humor to introduce the characters at the beginning of the film. And Gillian Anderson absolutely excelled at doing so much of the humor on the series. Just some of her most favorite episodes were ones where she got to play something kind of silly and goofy and kind of fun here and there, but she excelled so much with all the drama and the emotion, all these different things. She did great stuff, and in this film she gets to explore a full range of that type of stuff, because she just has a sort of strong sensibility about herself, but she has such a moral conviction, such a professional conviction, that when going up to the whole thing where they're probably going to break us up, they're going to send me off to some field off somewhere, it's like, I had a chance to pursue something in the medical field, but I decided to go to the FBI because I felt it could make a difference. And this entire thing, she kind of grapples with the entire film, is like, have I really made any kind of a difference? Have I really impacted anything in the years I've been working here, trying to do these things with Mulder and the X-Files and stuff like that. And so she kind of has to come through this entire thing where she's probably going to leave and go into a field of medicine, stuff like that. But it takes going through this entire journey with Mulder and all the things that befall them to also kind of reinforce who she is, where she stands, and how she goes through all these horrific type of things in the film. I can't walk away now. I can't go that route. I'm in this with you no matter what, because what I've been through, I can't allow anyone else to be through as well. I have to stand here and fight. I have to fight the future with Mulder here. So it's such a great type of thing to see these characters brought up to that next stance in their evolution of characters and take them through an arc in this story, because you could have a certain thing where they bring it to the film and they don't really do as much with the characters as you could, because they've done so much on the series that you can kind of have the characters almost coast through the story and have big things happen, but nothing really impact them. But they did such a great, smart type of thing to have a certain progression for Mulder and Scully moving through the film to get them to another place at the end of it, that they're a little bit shaky on the ground at the beginning of the film. It reinforces the relationship, reinforces what they stand for, why they're here, why they're doing what they're doing. So it's a great type of thing. And again, Gillian Anderson, fantastic actress, does such great work in this role. Just like as the series went along, she had so much deeper things to grapple with in the role of Scully here that I think she actually pulled it off magnificently every single time. Her and David Duchovny have magnificent chemistry together. You just feel the wit and the humor, but also the emotional scenes they play together is so very real. And of course, Mitch Pileggi, assistant director Walter Skinner, this guy is always such a strong actor with such a great sense of gravitas. Like, even going back to Shocker, him as Horace Pinker, a frightening, fantastic performance. And him doing all the stuff he did in X-Files was actually a fantastic piece of work. Just like everything he did from the beginning to the series to the very end of it, got so much room to develop the character. And he doesn't have a whole lot to do in the film, but he's still that grounding force between Mulder and Scully. He's always that kind of anchor for them to kind of like pull them along and try and give them a little bit of extra credibility, stand up for him, give them a little bit of something to lean on for him to kind of push them, pull through the sort of politics of the FBI. So it's like nice to always have him there as a very strong sensibility amongst the entire cast here. And a lot of extra people in the whole film, a lot of new people added into the whole film. Like I said, Jeffrey DeMunn playing Brown Schweig, this guy part of the Federal Emergency Management Agency and stuff like that, involved with the syndicate. Really nice piece of work for that fantastic character actor. Blythe Danner gets in here as seems like the head of the Office of Professional Review. Good stuff there. Armin Mueller-Stahl playing Strughold, which is a very interesting thing. They added this character in here because Mueller-Stahl never showed up on the X-Files before, never shows up again. But if you go back to the beginning of Season 3, the episode Paperclip, after Mulder and Scully have gone through this long journey of finding this sort of digital tape and all this decoding stuff that they had to go through for a number of episodes at this point, they end up going to the Strughold Mining Company at one point in time. At the end of that episode, you'll find all these thousands of medical records kind of stored here from years ago and stuff like that, part of the entire conspiracy of the alien colonization, all these different things have been gathering information all these years. So it was nice that they held onto that little thread of something like that, gave it to a certain actor here to come into the entire film to portray Struggle, kind of like the top boss of a certain thing, where he doesn't always show up, but like when he does, there's a certain reaction to that whole thing. There's a little bit more gravity given to it, that this guy is now calling everyone in for a big meeting, stuff like that, but kind of nice type of thing. Mueller-Stahl was kind of a fairly recognized actor at a certain point in time. Chris Carter had a very particular type of thing, wanting to get him into the entire fold of everything. So that was really nice. And Martin Landau, a fantastic actor as well, guy who was on the original Mission Impossible. He fit in so extremely well into the sort of shady noir syndicate type of deals. So he fit in so well with guys like, again, William B. Davis as Smoky Man. You got Jerry Hardin as Deep Throat, and John Neville as the well-manicured man, of course, Mulder's father. All these guys, they feel very much like they all fit right into the cogs of this entire shady type of stuff that's been going on for decades behind the scenes of the government, all this type of stuff. Perfect guy to get in here to kind of elicit all this exposition about all the kind of shady things about going on with the FEMA and all the plans for the alien colonization, all these little things to really form up the entire conspiracy to kind of a point to a certain degree. So did a fantastic job editing all that stuff in there and felt very natural slotting into the entire thing. And we got the wonderful John Neville here in swan song performance as the well-manicured man who had portrayed over 8 different episodes from the beginning of Season 3 to the end of Season 5. And it was always that kind of really nice, interesting conflict between him and the cigarette Smoky Man, whereas Smoky Man was always kind of like very kind of blunt force, just like throw enough bullets at the problem until it resolves itself. Well-manicured man was a little bit more wanting kind of finesse a certain situation, use a much more sophisticated sort of approach to resolving certain issues that ran into the syndicate. And it's really nice in this whole film that really kind of gets highlighted here for his character moving through, and you see a little bit of his family, and he kind of gets the wheels turning about where the syndicate is kind of going and making kind of rash sort of choices here and there, and how he kind of almost essentially breaks ranks and decides to go off and confront Mulder and give him the sort of weak vaccine they have to try to save Scully and try to kind of stave off the entire sort of colonization that the syndicate knows is now coming, knowing all the developments with all the stuff with the gestating alien, all this different stuff. So it was a really nice type of thing, kind of a nice callback to when he made his first appearance back in the Blessing Way, the very first episode of Season 3, where he kind of goes off and talks to Scully sort of outside of the sort of graces of the entire syndicate there. And it's very interesting having Terry Quinn in this entire film, especially Agent in Charge Mashad, because he had previously appeared in a Season 2 episode of The X-Files called Aubrey as a completely different character called Lieutenant Tillman, and would end up showing up in Season 9 as the character of Shadow Man, someone completely unrelated to both of these characters. So kind of an interesting type of thing. It's like, okay, well, Terry O'Quinn's a phenomenal actor. Nice to keep bringing it back because he delivers every single time. And still brought a certain credibility and strength to the entire character at the beginning of the film, seeing what Mashad has to commit himself to, his entire sort of bomb threat situation. So just good seeing Terry O'Quinn in anything he does. Just absolutely phenomenal actor. And just this entire cast does such a rock-solid type of job with all the regular X-Files cast members maintaining its stability for everything going on, and everyone else they bring in just fills it out with more texture and flavor overall. They just make a little bit of a more expansive world, do such a great job overall with just everything they put together for the characters, for the cast. Everything just fits so very well. And something else that really stepped up the game on this whole thing were the visual and special makeup effects, because the series always had some pretty groundbreaking type of things done to it. It really kind of were very ambitious of what they were trying to do on the series with the types of budgets they had and the technology that was going on in the 90s, getting up into digital effects and stuff like that. But this film really pushed it right to the full theatrical level of 1998. Did fantastic. I love so much the entire effect they did with the entire explosion, the building that collapses in Dallas, because they used a mixture of both miniature model work and CGI stuff. All of it blends so absolutely perfectly. Everything you see with the actual building, once it is collapsing, is all a miniature. I absolutely love the entire shot where they pan around that back of Mulder and Scully there, and you see it in the background and all this great scale they put onto it. It's all a visual effect shot. It looks absolutely fantastic. And also the stuff with the black oil, because they had already introduced it on the series and used certain effects to that degree, but they definitely amplified it because they needed a higher resolution stuff for the big screen. Everything came out with like texture mapping and kind of motion tracking with the kid's face at the beginning of the film and stuff like that. So they just evolved the effects and got the much larger budget on this whole thing. You have the $66 million to put in this whole film. Just like they really put all that money on screen with the effects work on this whole thing. All comes out really, really well. I mean, there's a few minor dated feelings in terms of like when they get on the alien ship, and some of the CGI it kind of shows it's kind of late 90s. It's still not absolutely at the nth degree of resolution and quality and minute details, stuff like that. But it's very ambitious and very large scale, as I said before. Putting that whole ship together, the entire design of it, kind of has a mixture of kind of like, say, from the Alien franchise, where like Star Trek First Contact, has that kind of dark, kind of green type of feel to it, and here and there. Feels very, very, very familiar in a certain way, but still elicits some very dark, disturbing type of feelings once you get in there with Mulder. Really good type of stuff, and the makeup effects in the entire film were mainly handled by Amalgamated Dynamics Incorporated, who also had been working on the Alien franchise, Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, and a bunch of other whole films. They come up through the Stan Winston Studios with Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff moving in and establishing their own company here. So they mainly handled everything where they had all the effects for the actual alien. All this stuff that came up from the black oil and kind of manifested itself and kind of birthed itself out as after it gestated inside the guy and whatnot, and all these different things at the end of the film with rod puppets and also having Tom Woodruff actually in the outfit in certain places where they had to have a little bit more animated sensibility about it. They really just put it on the top scale of everything. And they had a little extra help from K&B Effects as well. They handled a little bit of additional makeup effects in the whole film. So these two guys, these two companies, were on the top levels. Fantastic type of work in that regard. Just like they made everything really gooey. Real gooey with the alien and all that other stuff. Just like seeing the kind of like hollowed out body, whatnot. All the like minerals and proteins, all this type of stuff has kind of been sapped out of the bodies. And they look kind of weird and stuff like that. It looks really creepy and really exceptional how they put all that stuff together and make it look fantastic on the big screen. All the type of stuff, just like they got all these right people involved. They have the same visual effects guy, Matt Beck, who worked on the series, worked on the entire first 9 seasons of the entire series. This guy was completely linked in and tied in with everything they had done. He had been working with a company called Light Matters at the time, later established his own company of Entity FX, and they had a bunch of other little visual effects companies kind of working in different parts of the entire film, but all the stuff they really come together so very well on such a high grade quality for 98. Didn't get any Oscar nominations or anything like that, but in a year which had like Armageddon and Godzilla and a few other big type of special effects films, I can see how it kind of fell a little bit short of the entire like top 5 or whatnot of the year, but I think did a really fantastic, phenomenal job making the film look as good as it could to aid both Ward Russell's cinematography and bring all the science fiction elements on a much bigger scale than you could do on the small screen. Really did a fantastic job across the board. Just how at the end of the film we're up in the Arctic or whatnot, and the ship's coming up and the ice is kind of waking away and stuff like that. Everything comes together so very well. Again, some like the green screen stuff, it's a sliver of datedness here and there, but they don't linger on it. They don't accentuate it in any type of way. It's like, it works really, really well. A really good job on every front put together to make everything look very impressive and very impactful and give a very satisfying sensibility of a large-scale sort of story to tell on this canvas here. And on someone else brought over from the series, again, still organically flowing in here, is Mark Snow doing the score for the whole thing, because mainly on the series he was doing mainly kind of like synthesizer type stuff. But they gave him an orchestra this time because they wanted a larger feeling for the whole thing, and he absolutely just goes right into it perfectly. He just takes that iconic X-Files theme, gives it such a lush, sweeping sensibility about it. It's such an interesting kind of this nice haunting little whistly theme that they had for the series, which is absolutely fantastic, and it's given a much larger sensibility in the entire film. It's one of my favorite tracks I was listening to on the soundtrack. Wonderful stuff. It just brings all the elements and such a larger sensibility overall. I loved what he did with the entire score. And you can still get this sort of more somewhat expanded type of way from limited edition version from La La Land Records. It goes for about $20, but you can get it, and they got some alternate tracks on there and stuff like that. I think it's really worthwhile. If you really like the music that he puts together for the series, this is definitely an essential companion piece to what he did with all those soundtracks they released from the series. This one got to go right in your collection as well. Now, the whole wider scope issue of the entire film is really how it all fits in with the continuity of the series here, because there's a lot of good things to praise for it. That brings in a lot of elements. Doesn't really tie them up, but kind of brings them up to a point of certain things. It kind of ties them together a little bit so you can start seeing more of the big picture. But there are certain things that are a bit of a disconnect in terms of certain arcs and certain little things that feel like they probably should be here, but they're not here, because obviously when you're making this bigger film, you need to sort of plan it in a certain way where you're going to reach a wider audience. Because you're not just relying just on the TV series fan base, which are getting the series for free every week. Now you have to bring in people who want to pay to see it, and you have to kind of stretch it out a little bit and make it more wider appealing to a certain degree. So you can't really bog it down with too many of the long-standing 5-season-long character arcs and mythologies and all these really deep type of things. You kind of have to keep a little bit, sort of like I said earlier, locked down to certain core elements and not kind of bring in a lot of things that would be a little bit too much of a complex type of thing for the audience to really kind of break down and kind of decipher in a certain way. So the good things it does have for it is that the entire thing with the black oil, which came up in the middle of season 3 in the episodes Piper, Maru, and Apocrypha, where this deep sea excavation kind of brings up this guy who is still down there from World War II, but he was infected with the black oil and gets into this diver, he gets into his wife, and eventually gets into the hands of anyone's favorite character to hate, Alex Krycek. That eventually gets back in the hands of the Secret Smoking Man and gets poured out into this spacecraft that's in this missile silo somewhere. Very creepy stuff across the board, and the whole thing introduced it extremely well, and they do pick it up in several other episodes down the line. But at the end of season 3 into season 4, they introduce the whole thing with the bees, which would end up, of course, being the sort of delivery device for this alien colonization, the black oil and everything like that. So they put it together in like Talitha Kumi and Herrenvolk, this 2-part season ender, season beginner type of thing, which also furthered the story of the alien-human hybrid story that's not part of the film. Because apparently the Syndicate took all this information, the science and the genetics and stuff like that from the aliens and started to concoct this sort of alien-human hybrid race that would survive the alien colonization, and something that kind of predates all this other stuff. Predates the bees, predates the black oil in the series. Kind of interesting that it's not anywhere part of the story here because it was such a very, very strong element of the entire series. A lot of episodes dealt with it, including having Brian Thompson's character, the shape-shifting alien bounty hunter. It was wonderful in the entire series, really bringing a lot of great qualities to it. And they kind of led towards some other interesting sort of developments towards season 5 into season 6, where this entire faceless alien rebels kind of show up and they're kind of like the ones who are going to like stop everything. They're coming out and they're trying to stop everything. They mutilate their faces so they can't be infected with the black oil. And none of that stuff gets involved with the entire film, and maybe it really didn't have a place for it anywhere, but kind of the interesting thing how the Syndicate gets a vaccine where they didn't really have one before is because, as Alex Krycek, his character, ends up going into the episodes Terma and Tunguska in season 4 with Mulder, they end up in a Russian prison camp where they're testing out the black oil on certain inmates there and stuff like that. And eventually Krycek kind of weasels his way into their good graces, stuff like that. So he gets involved with a sort of Russian syndicate or some sort, and they develop a certain vaccine that ends up getting the hands of everyone by the end of season 5. But it's kind of shaded here and there about where they got it and stuff like that. They don't really address anything with that backstory from season 5. So that's kind of the interesting type of things. Like they had all these really interesting elements that they brought into the film. Knew that they really wanted to have these pinpointed as certain specific elements to tell the story they wanted to. But there are certain elements that don't get addressed like that with the hybrids and the alien bounty hunter and the faceless rebels, which are ongoing storylines at this point in time that really haven't come to a point yet. And of course there's certain things like, okay, character of Alex Krycek has just gotten back in with the Syndicate along with the Smoking Man. Krycek's not in the movie anywhere. Even when I was watching the film back in '98, in between the actual first broadcast of season 5 and season 6, it's like, where's Krycek in this movie? He's right there, right next to all these guys, right at the end of season 5, not present anywhere in the film. And the big thing is that Mulder's character arc gets shifted around in season 5. Because there's the conclusion of season 4 that leads into a 2-parter at the beginning of season 5 called Redux, where Mulder becomes completely disillusioned by everything. He encounters this character, Michael Krichkow, who works for the Pentagon and has all these interior secrets about everything. And he pretty much lays it out to Mulder that everything is a hoax. There's no aliens, there's no real abductions. All the stuff he's seen has all been a massive smokescreen for other like military organizations and military sort of plans and stuff like that. All these interesting things they have going on in the background with the syndicate and the government, all these different things. None of it's actually real. It's sort of a thing to kind of just drape over everything as just like a scapegoat for like anything that goes wrong with what they're doing behind the scenes. They can blame it on this thing that no one really believes that aliens are real, so they can just fabricate a weird story around it and slap it out there. So the interesting thing is that this character arc, where Mueller now gets completely disillusioned, doesn't believe that any of the alien stuff is real anymore, goes throughout the entire 5th season of the show. Doesn't start turning until right about the end of the season here, but Mulder doesn't get completely over the hump of going right back to where he was before all that happened, but as the film was written and shot before they really kind of put all that together, it doesn't address it all. There's this big sort of gap at the end of season 5 where Mulder's like, he's kind of there, but he's not all the way back to being the Mulder of old. But the Mulder in the movie is the Mulder of old, so there's a bit of a disconnect type of thing. Things don't entirely sort of link up and align properly in that way. So it's like they had this entire character arc of his character and a lot of things going on in that regard. And of course, other little things like I already mentioned, stuff like that throughout season 5 that just don't quite link up and pinpoint right where he is in the film. So they tried getting it there. They didn't get it there as convincingly as possible. And there's other little things in season 5, such as the character of Special Agent Jeffrey Spinner, portrayed by Chris Owens, who had previously portrayed in flashbacks a younger version of the cigarette smoking man, so probably didn't come too much of a surprise to people when they actually revealed he is the son of the cigarette smoking man. And that kind of comes out through like the latter half of season 5 and firmly confirmed at the very end of the season finale there. But obviously Jeffrey Spencer's not in the movie. Secret Smoking Man's arc in season 5 where they attempted to assassinate him at a certain point, and then they finally brought him back in the season finale, and he's still a little bit disconnected from, almost feels like he's kind of a hired mercenary in a certain way, a freelancer in a certain way, to kind of like, he's not fully back in the fold of everything by the end of that season, but in the movie, he feels like he's just been there all along, and stuff like that. So you can see how the character arcs they wrote into season 5 and kept going on to a certain point. It was like, we do have to link up to a certain degree, do have to get certain people back into a certain position by the end of the season, but the character arcs don't entirely form up and feel like they organically get dressed and flow in throughout the movie. So it feels like there's almost a soft reboot type of thing when you hit the movie. It's like, we're going to slightly shift it forward in a certain way, kind of disregard a little bit of stuff here and move it into season 6 where things get a little bit picked up, but also some things get a little bit sort of put on the shelf for a while. And then as they go along in season 6, when they get to the point where it's like this entire conspiracy stuff with the syndicate and various other things, as you set up like faceless rebels and all these other things with the black oil and the colonization stuff. We've been going on for 5.5 seasons now. We kind of have to close it off to a certain degree because we can't just keep ringing the same bell over and over again and get tiresome for the audience as well as the writers and stuff like that. You have to find new, fresh places to take the story of the X-Files. So halfway through the season, the syndicate gets wiped out by the faceless rebels and things go off in a different direction to a certain degree where they get a little contrived and things get really kind of weird in certain places and how they moves different story elements a lot further outer towards the reaches of like, okay, that's going really deep and far into different elements of like the human origin of the human race and all these really involved ideas that I don't think quite were executed as well as they could have been. And the series, they started showing a little bit of wear on itself because season 5 was the highest rated season. Everything after that, which includes after the movie, the rating, the sort of average ratings for each season started going down every season. So it's like they hit the peak right here. Everything just kind of started falling off a little bit in terms of certain people's interests and stuff like that. You still had the hardcore audience there, but the peak of the popularity kind of waned a little bit after the next several years. And Dave Duchovny wanted to kind of move into other things. He didn't want to stay with the series as much anymore. He kind of departed the series and came back here and there. And they kind of write Mulder out to a certain degree by getting him abducted on an alien spacecraft, which flows into season 8, and you get Robert Patrick as Special Agent John Doggett, who does add certain different quality to the entire series, and a lot of people had a lot of uproar and kind of very upset about things like you're changing things, you're getting rid of Mulder, you're bringing in this other character. But I actually like season 8. I was watching a lot of season 8. It's like, it's not the exact same type of series because you've gone on for so long at this point that the entire series has to evolve to a certain degree, and the characters have to evolve, and the tone gets a little bit more introspective, gets a little more reflective, a little bit more emotional overall. But there's a lot of good episodes in season 8 with Robert Patrick, and eventually when you get Duchovny back and he's back in the fold, and there's still good episodes with him as well. And then you get Annabeth Gish coming in as Monica Reyes, and she has a history with Doggett, stuff like that, and they do hit off a lot of good chemistry, and they add a lot of different elements to the entire series that I think still were very good. Season 9 gets a little dodgy here and there. It's not quite as good. You get kind of feeling a little bit of the fatigue in the creative department and stuff like that. So they do wrap it up initially at the end of season 9 with a series finale that a lot of people were kind of divided on. It wasn't quite as satisfying. It was a lot of exposition. Just like everyone coming in and doing a lot of like background type of things to talk about, well, this, and everything, kind of sum up everything that's happened and this sort of trial against Mulder. It really didn't hit off great in a certain way, but the series was kind of exhausted at that point in time. It really didn't have much else you could go off of, but it was the kind of interesting thing with Chris Carter that when he did propose the film, he intended the series to end at season 5, and then we go into movies, a franchise of successive films to further tell the story of the X-Files on the big screen, and then the entire TV series completely. But Fox is like, this series is way too freaking popular, way too profitable for us with all the advertisers and the demographics, all these different things. We're not letting you cancel the series. We're not letting you end the series. We're going to keep it going. And so when you finally get to a second film 10 years after the first film, and the series has been off air for like 8 years, about 6 years or so, this entire film that comes out, X-Files, I Want to Believe, which ended up being much more like a Monster of the Week story instead of anything really involving mythology. And I saw trailers back then. I've seen trailers now. I'm still not interested in seeing it, and a lot of people, most fans, don't have a great reaction to it. Some like it, most don't have a very high opinion of the film. They just weren't very satisfied, and also the fact that Fox didn't do a hell of a lot of promotion for it, and they kind of released it like a week or two after The Dark Knight, which made like $1 billion at the box office, and this thing really suffered very heavily because of that wake, and because of lack of real strong marketing push, and probably because, again, it didn't get the best of reviews and best of reactions for the fans, so it ended up being very lukewarm at best for everyone in the franchise and the legacy of the everything like that. But I'll say several years later, we end up getting a revival series. We get a season 10, which gets followed up by a season 11. And I just didn't care. I watched the first episode, and again, like the series finale, it ended up being this giant exposition dump, and having a lot of things that are trying to be like retconning certain things and then acting like you're revealing certain things from the first time, despite the fact you revealed that like 4 seasons before this. And a lot of people had very, very, very critical things to say about the 11th season of the X-Files. I just felt like, I'm done. I think season 9 was a good enough end. I don't need to overextend it for myself. So it's like one of these weird type of things, like a franchise that can be popular in a certain era, maybe doesn't work as well in another era. A certain friend of mine kind of views that in a certain way. Like, again, the whole culture I said at the beginning of the video. Back in the 90s, all that type of stuff, like alien abductions and weird science fiction type of things and supernatural stories here and there and accounts and sightings and stuff like that. It was kind of a big sort of cultural type of swell in a certain way that fit in that type of era. And before you had major things like the internet and stuff like that, it just felt like it was kind of like right on the zeitgeist of something right there on the pulse. and it felt right for the time. You know, bring it back years later, maybe it doesn't quite fit as well into the era that it's being set in and stuff like that. So, I don't know. Maybe you just can't really capture the magic. Some people probably feel very differently about those later seasons. But kind of an interesting type of thing that, regardless of anything else, we're talking about the movie here, the 1998 movie. And that's the main thing I need to sum up here, is that the film is necessary. If you're watching the series in any type of fashion, this is an important cog to certain things. Even though it kind of glosses over certain things that they didn't have the ability to plan for at the certain time they made it, the film is still a good piece of work. And it does, again, have the samplings of so much of what made the series what it was. Why it was so popular, why it was so good, so well executed in such ways that it's just like, it's a good piece of sci-fi regardless of any other weird type of things with continuity or other things you'd really want as a hardcore, diehard fan to really have so much in there. It's still a good story told about Mulder and Scully going through certain things to get to a certain point to develop their characters forward. So I think this film holds up very, very well. I'd like to hear what you guys at least have to say about how you feel about the 1998 film, how it melds into the mythology, into the franchise, and how you felt like, if you saw it in 98, how did you kind of feel going from the end of season 5 into this whole thing and kind of feeling how it worked on the big screen, how the kind of transition felt to you, and it didn't feel very organic, or did it feel a little jarring in a certain way, how things kind of moved between the different story elements. So guys, that's a ton of stuff, and I watched so much, and I probably left out a few elements here and there that I could have written down, but I think that's way enough. That's goddamn enough. So guys, it's been a long time trying to get this whole video put together. A lot of weeks watching episodes, back and forth across seasons, gathering information. I'm spent. Thank you so much, guys, because it's been a lot of time getting this going, and I hope you really enjoyed it. So guys, there's always the Patreon to contribute to this channel, keep things moving forward around here, and just make great stuff. So guys, thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.